Hit Wicket is the cricket game backed by Harsha Bogle and me, so you know it's full of nerd energy. This strategic cricket game isn't just about frantic tapping. You make decisions based on how cricket actually works. You've got to set a batter up, right? And you can't hit a six from the first ball. Hit Wicket knows all that, and they made a game that makes it work with a few gaming twists in there as well. So play, build, and manage your team, because you are the batter, the bowler, the coach, the selector. I mean, you're basically everything in this game, right? And there's no ads on Hit Wicket. So download it for free for mobile and unleash your inner cricket legend. Name and job title, please, sir.
This is Vivek Krishnan. I am a cricket writer for the Hindustan Times.
So I contacted you ages ago about talking about KL Rahul, and then the World Cup happened and I couldn't get there and he wasn't playing. And then I said to you, what else do you want to talk about? And you said Mayank Yadav. And it's really interesting because like everyone else in the world, I've been absolutely obsessed with Mayank Yadav. But the one thing I haven't really done is had a chance to talk to him. So I'm going to unleash on you here. But I want to talk about I think the funnest fact about Mayank Yadav is that he's a young Indian fast bowler, and we've basically seen him bowl 73 deliveries. And that's it.
Yeah.
Like at the moment, he's more fantasy than reality, right?
Yeah, which is why that piece on Mayank Yadav, I started with that here is an Indian bowler who's bowled 73 deliveries. And it probably didn't even take 73 deliveries for this obsession really to kickstart, because it just took like 2-3 overs of his first game. And obviously, the speedometer showing 155, 156, especially in India, that gets a lot of people excited pretty quickly because it's so rare. So.
Yeah, well, do you remember Umran Malik when he came in and everyone getting very excited? And I think I might have written a piece for Cricinfo at the time, basically saying like he's very fast and we're all very excited, but we're not particularly sure if he's any good yet, right? Like we don't know where that is. Mayank Yadav looks from the 73 balls like he's a bit more accurate, like it's a bit more repeatable, and like he knows what he's doing. Just take me back to the start though. So he basically comes onto the scene at around what, 13, 14?
Yeah, so he's from Sonnet Club in Delhi, which is like one of the most famous academies in India. A bunch of players who played for India, whether it's Ashish Nehra, Shikhar Dhawan, Rishabh Pant, Akash Chopra, even further back Manoj Prabhakar. A lot of players from Delhi are from that club. So he's from there too. And from what I gather, so around 13 or 14 is when he went to Sonnet. And like in the words of his current, in the words of the current coach at Sonnet, right from the time that he started bowling, he just had that zip. And like we always say, right, that pace can't be taught. And I guess, with Mayank too, I think at least in terms of speed, I think the potential was obvious very quickly to the people who saw him. So
it's interesting that he was at a major club, and if you compare him to say Pat Cummins, or someone like that coming through, or occasionally some of the West Indian bowlers, sometimes at 16, 17, 18, 19, you hear a lot about Mayank Yadav. Why didn't we hear as much about him at that point? Was it because he was constantly injured? Had he not played a lot? What was the situation that, especially, I would expect it's different for someone like Umran Malik, who sort of comes from from out of the sticks and has to come in a little bit more. But if you're already in the center, why was it we weren't hearing much about him as he was developing?
I think although the coach says that he bowled, I think with fast bowlers sometimes like you can be pretty ordinary, or even though if you have pace, I think it just takes maybe a year or two for things to suddenly change. So with Mayank Yadav, until maybe 2-3 years back, I don't think people really heard a lot about him. It may have been injuries too, because and we've seen it now. Like after that IPL, he hasn't played any cricket. He's right now in the National Cricket Academy in Bangalore, and he's not been picked in any of the Duleep Trophy squads either. So I think it could be injuries, and also like in terms of you might be bowling fast, but I think your name is not really heard unless you're picking wickets, I guess. So in terms of junior cricket, I'm not sure whether he was also prolific in terms of taking wickets and stuff, because he missed the Under-19 World Cup bus. And that in India, the Under-19 World Cup has become so huge over the past few years that only if you make it to the Under-19 World Cup do people consider you as a prospect. So I think Mayank probably was part of that 2018 batch where Kamlesh Nagarkoti and Shivam Mavi, so much was heard about them.
Mm.
But yeah, he didn't really make the cut for the under 19 World Cup. So yeah.
And in 2022, he's still not like particularly famous when he's picked up for Lucknow. So I think he went for what, around 20 lakh. So what's that, about 20,000, 25,000 US
Yeah, I
dollars?
think he went. Yeah, he went at his base price. So
Yeah. So it wasn't like there were bunches of people suddenly saying this is going to be the next big thing, and they didn't bowl him at all at that stage. And so he wasn't being hyped. When did they start to realize that they've got something special?
I think by last season, Jarrod, so Morne Mokul, when Mayank started doing well this season, he did mention that he had a look at him last year and was really impressed. And I think he would have played last season. He would have made his debut in the IPL last season, if not for, I think, hamstring injury in one of the practice sessions with Lucknow. So I think the pace was obvious. So probably may have played last year. But yeah, because of the injury again, yeah, he couldn't and has had to wait another 12 months. And with Delhi as well, with his domestic team, he's had frequent injuries because of which he hasn't played a lot for Delhi either.
No, exactly. And then he doesn't start the first game for Lucknow, does he? Is that a couple of games in before he starts? And then he plays on the 30th of March against Punjab. He doesn't come on to bowl to the 10th over. So really interesting period of the game. So obviously they were still a bit nervous about him bowling at that point. And Shikhar Dhawan and Johnny Bairstow were 88 without loss, chasing 200. So in a pretty good chance to come in. And they actually smashed his first over for like 10. There's a couple of boundaries. There were some good balls. And then after that, I'll try and recreate it as best I can. You chip in whenever you need to. But Shikhar Dhawan hits one straight up in the air when it's just clear that this is too fast for him. It doesn't get caught, though. It ends up looping over the bowler's head. Bairstow then tries to play a pull shot and the ball completely rushes him. Prabh Simran tries to slog one away and is massively behind him. And Jitesh Sharma is facing him and literally riding the ball like he's facing Curtly Ambrose in a test match in the 90s. Looks like he's riding dragons, right? Like trying to keep these balls down. Shots you don't see in T20 games of like riding the ball off your throat. And he ends up finishing with 3 for 27 and completely changing that game.
Yeah, and I think you mentioned that he went for 10 runs in his first over, but I think even in that first over, there were a couple of deliveries where you felt that the batters were rushed, and like he was bowling to Shikhar Dhawan and Johnny Bairstow, who have obviously international cricketers, played against the fastest of bowlers, but you could see that even Bairstow is someone who's still playing international cricket, and he was also rushed, and I think I think all of his wickets were of the shorter ball. And all of them were trying to pull, but it just was too fast for them. So yeah, that was something that was quite noticeable. And then of course the game after that against RCB, the way he got Cameron Green out, yeah. If you want to talk about that,
well, let's go through that. So that was the one where he bowls 156.7, which I think was that his fastest in the tournament.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah. So this is the second game. He gets 3 for 14 in this game, and he gets Rajat Patidar, Glenn Maxwell, and Cameron Green. So if you look at the names he's got so far, like none of these are, replacement level players. They're all above that, and about 4 or 5 of them are about 5 of them are proper international players, right? But what's really interesting, so I have access to NV Play, so I can go back and watch every ball. So last night before we did this podcast, I watched all 73 deliveries. Right.
Okay.
I watched them once, and then my son came over and said, "Who's that?" And I showed him, and then he got obsessed. So I probably watched more of Mayank Yadav bowl than anyone other than his coaches back in Sonnet have ever watched him. Right. It's really interesting if you watch the first ball he bowls to RCB, or the first or second ball. But I think it's the first one. Faf du Plessis gets run out, right? And if you watch Faf du Plessis' feet, it's a full and straight ball, and he backs away a little bit. Now, I'm not saying he was afraid, but I would say this. It's the kind of run I've seen older players. I've seen Kevin Peterson and Shahid Afridi play when they're older and they're facing someone a little bit too quick. And they literally just tap the ball and run. They don't want to face that guy, right? And then you keep watching. And Glenn Maxwell, who has the fastest hands maybe in international cricket, you watch him play the pull shot off another short ball, and he just looks slow. His hands suddenly look slow in comparison. What's the guy from RC? Is it Rorat? Is that Anuj Rorat? Is that his name?
Yeah, Anuj Rawat.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you're watching him. So he's a left-hander. You can noticeably see him doing two things: walking across his stumps and keeping his bat really low. Right. So his back lift, you could see him shortening his back lift during that. And then they showed something on the screen, which was the interception points. So for all the other bowlers, the batters were like way down the crease when hitting them, and every time they're hitting Mayank Yadav, they're hitting him all the way back. It's all the way back on the stumps. And there's also the Dinesh Karthik LBW that was given and then taken away. But I think it's Cameron Green that's the most interesting for me. So Cameron Green grew up in Perth and has probably been bounced a million times on fast wickets and everything else. He gets a pull shot away, which he mishits he doesn't mishit it, but he almost gets caught at mid-on playing a pull shot. And then his feet just go what we would call in the toilet in Australia. Like, it's not even just that he's backing away. They're just going nowhere. Right? Yeah. Like, he doesn't know what to do with his feet at all and is completely bowled. And I think to do that to an Australian who grew up in Western Australia specifically, who's a test level batter, right? That was the bit where, and I remember seeing that one live and thinking, that is phenomenal cricket. Like, that is something else. And that whole game was even more impressive, I think, than what he did against Punjab.
Yeah, the dismissal of Green was something that struck me too, because as you mentioned, he's someone I think who's grown up playing at the Wacker, and obviously he must be pretty used to the pace and bounce. But it was the kind of dismissal that if an Indian batter was out that way, I think we would be writing obituaries about not having the ability to play international cricket, because it looked like he was premeditating and expecting the short ball almost, and was just done in when the length was a bit fuller. And so pretty remarkable.
Yeah, and it's interesting to me because you watch and like I said, Faf's footwork has changed. Royat's footwork has changed. Green's footwork has changed. And you go back through, and you can see with Shikhar Dhawan as well from that other game of like, he comes up with a completely different method. Most of these guys have faced Mark Wood and Anrich Nortje, right? Yeah. Who are roughly the same pace as Mayank Yadav. And, probably in Wood's case, maybe bowled slightly quicker, but Anrich Nortje has bowled that pace before. It just felt like it feels quicker watching it than that. Now, maybe it's because we've been watching Wood for years and we've forgotten what Wood was like when he first bowled, right? But it just felt a little bit different, and all the trigger movements and everything. And it's hard when you see that as a cricket writer to not be like, wait a minute, is Cameron Green backing away? Is Faf du Plessis backing away? Is it just that, as you said, they were premeditating because of the pace and they're getting a little bit caught up and everything else? But it does make them look like associate level batters or tail enders at times, that's just raw pace. He's just blowing through them.
Yeah, maybe batters aren't yet used to his action, so it'll be interesting to see next season whether the same thing happens, because batters do talk about this, right? Like someone like Brett Lee, for example, who had a very clean action and a rhythmic run up. Batters, although he was incredibly fast and very tough to play, batters would say that he was easier to pick up, say, as compared to a Waqar Younis, and Waqar was probably a bit slower than Brett Lee, but maybe with Mayank, it's just that he's got that skiddy action and almost rushes onto the batter. So that's something maybe that batters aren't yet used to him, and it'll be interesting to see whether, because watching him bowl this season, it did feel like a lot of top level batters are like almost backing away or being hurried by the pace a bit too often, which you don't really see in international cricket or even in the IPL at this level. You don't see that's something
No, I think you're right. I was wondering whether it was that for whatever reason, maybe to do with his height or his action, he doesn't lose as much pace after the ball bounces. So Mark Wood is very, very quick, but quite often Mark Wood is banging it in and it I wouldn't say it slows down, but he's hitting the wicket. Whereas Anrich Nortje again really hits the wicket. Both of those guys hit the wicket quite hard, even if Mark Wood's probably more a similar athlete to Mayank Yadav, height-wise and everything else. And Anrich Nortje is obviously a lot bigger. But to me, that both looks like those guys hit the pitch. But there's something about Mayank Yadav that felt like it was skidding off the pitch. And the other guy that reminded me of was Shemar Joseph, right? Who's very, very similar. Shemar Joseph isn't as quick. Like, if you look at his raw pace, he doesn't get as quick as any of those other three. But you talk to the players who faced him, and they talk about him in the same way, right? Like, he's always rushing you and everything else. So we might be seeing, and if we want to go back in history, the Malcolm Marshall, Dale Steyn type bowlers are probably quite similar, right? Whereas If you bang the ball into the pitch, it slows down. Whereas if you skid it off the pitch, it keeps that pace. And so maybe we're seeing that. The other interesting thing is you've got a young Indian player coming in, and forget that he's a fast bowler, but a young Indian player coming in and winning man of the match in the first 2 games that they play in. That is like, there's no way to not hype that up, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Like, he's just 22, and yeah, in his first 2 games to win player of the match. And of course, yeah, being a fast bowler, it's again, as I mentioned, it's so much of a rarity. Just getting back to the pace aspect, I think it would be instructive if we had an idea of what the pace is by the time the ball reaches the batter. That's something that broadcasters these days don't tend to show as much of. So
Because it's not
maybe
as
that
sexy.
data. Yeah, but yeah, that would be interesting to see whether he's actually, as you mentioned, because yeah, it does seem like he skids the ball off the surface and rather than just banging it in. So that may be making a difference. Yeah.
If you make any content, Minvo Pro is the tool for you. Take your long format content and cut it and slice it for social media. This AI-inspired weapon will turn your one piece of work into so many clips. Try Minvo.pro now. Unfortunately, that's kind of all we see is those 2 games. In his 3rd game, he bowls an over and leaves with an abdominal strain. He then comes back about 3 weeks later against Mumbai Indians, bowls first 3 overs untroubled, and we all get excited again. Then he takes a wicket and walks off with, I believe, a lower side strain, I think, at that stage. So if you look at the last 2 years in the IPL, he's had a lower side strain, an abdominal strain, and a hamstring strain. In the space of 73 balls, if you can count those all being 73 balls. The biggest issue at the moment is literally, is he physically able to bowl as much as we all want him to bowl, right? Like, you know, if you go into his first-class career, he's played 1 first-class game. He's only taken 2 wickets. He's only bowled 104 balls. List A cricket, he's bowled 822 balls. He's taken 34 wickets at 21. So his numbers completely hold up. In the brief amount of first-class cricket where he had a bowling average of 23, if you can count 23 when you've only gone for 46 runs, but still. And then 34 wickets at 21. And obviously in T20 cricket at the moment, he's got a bowling average of 14. But he's only bowled 8,000 balls at the moment in first-class cricket. And, we compared him to Shemar Joseph before. Shemar Joseph's having very similar issues. Neither of these guys have actually bowled all that much. They are very young, but they both look to me physically undeveloped. And I always remember the Dirk Nannes thing of maybe the best thing for fast bowlers is to be injured between the age of 18 and 26, so you can't bowl all that much because your body isn't ready to bowl 95 miles an hour when you're 18 to 24, even if you can do it. And, Pat Cummins is the perfect example of that as well, right? And we get other bowlers who don't and everything else, but that sort of Dirk Nannes, Anrich Nortje, physicality. It's like those guys are probably better bowlers and more consistently fast bowlers. And Mark Wood maybe is another one because they start to bowl consistently later in their career because of other factors. How worried are they, and how much of the BCCI trying to work out how to get this guy on the park?
I think he's obviously a precious commodity, and so I think they're going to be trying to do everything possible to make sure that they can get him on the park. And I guess the one thing that's important is not to rush him in too much. We heard during the IPL, and it was very premature, talking about maybe putting him on the flight to Australia and how. But I think it's too premature. And as you mentioned, with someone like Cummins, for example, he took that time. He made his debut at the age of 18, but didn't start playing regularly until 2017 when he was about 24. And I think even if it takes 1 or 2 years, I think it's worth making sure that his body is as strong as possible, and then getting him in. But yeah, it's going to be interesting how they do that. Maybe playing. I don't know how much first class cricket he'll play this season. The problem in India also now is that a lot of these fast bowlers, because of the money that the IPL offers, sometimes almost seem to be saving themselves for the IPL, and so it's going to be a tricky situation, and there's no easy answer to this, I guess, in terms of making sure that he develops perfectly. Yeah.
He's already the fastest bowler ever from India, right?
Yeah, at least the speedometer suggests so.
Yeah. We've had Varun Aaron and Umran Malik and we can go back through the history of random guys that we've now forgotten the names of who come up. He looks to me a little bit more robust than those two particular bowlers. And, we can go back through the history of Indian bowlers and everything else. Are we overhyping him after 73 balls? Are we, because it's not a big sample size. Are we adequately talking about him as someone who could be great one day, and we might never hear from him again because he might slow down just because his body falls apart? Like, what do you see the future of Mayank Yadav? Where will he play? How good will he be? And I know that's an impossible question to ask you, which is why I haven't answered it, and I've asked you.
Yeah, it is an impossible question. I think in terms of red ball cricket, I don't think we can say anything right now because whether he's actually any good in terms of having the accuracy and in terms of like Bumrah and for example consistently bowling in one area and having that endurance, that is something that's hard to answer. But in terms of limited overs cricket, based on what we've seen, I think he can be a real asset for India if of course he's fit and if they can manage to get him on the park. I think in limited overs cricket he'll be a very good bowler. But yeah, it's too early, Jarrod, because yeah, we've seen with Umran Malik during that first season in the IPL, he too showed a lot of promise and people got excited, even though he was a bit more erratic than what we saw from Mayank maybe this season. But that second or third season, I think, is really required to have a more accurate assessment of where he is. But I think the good thing now is that after the IPL, I haven't heard too much on Mayank. I think he's just laying low and recovering from his injury, and I don't think there's any rush to get him back in or anything of that sort. The BCCI has started giving out fast bowling contracts because I think they're looking at building a pool of fast bowlers, especially once Bumrah, Shami, these guys go. So I think they're looking to manage him, and I think they'll take special care of him for sure. So I think they'll do everything possible to make sure that he plays as much as possible, even if it's maybe 2 years down the line.
Assuming full fitness, do you think we see him in the Champions Trophy?
It depends on how much cricket he's played before that. If we can get back, he's, as I mentioned, he's not part of the Duleep Trophy, so I'm not too sure how quickly he'll be back in the scheme of things for his domestic side in the domestic season, which is starting soon. But I think it really depends on how much cricket he can get in before the Champions Trophy. And I think India have a pretty settled bowling attack because there's Bumrah, there's Harshdeep, there is Siraj, and if Shami comes back in, there is Shami as well. So I think there's no hurry in terms of trying to do things too quickly with Mayank. I think
it's quite interesting because the next Champions Trophy is before the World Cup, and before the IPL, I should say. And so he's going to have to show for India that he's ready to play in the Champions Trophy. As I said, there's nothing wrong with his one-day figures. And then, hilariously, the next T20 World Cup is also just before the IPL, right? So again, he's actually going to have to play. It's not like he can be picked directly from IPL cricket. He's going to have to play for India, you would assume, to get into either of those squads going ahead. So, and when we're talking about, you were talking about it before, it makes the most sense at the moment for him to channel all of his efforts into he wants to get his next big IPL payday. He's never got the bag, Vivek. He's never got the briefcase full of cash yet. So he's probably thinking, I need to secure that and go forward. It's an incredible story though, isn't it? And I feel like, and I don't know if anyone's ever done this, but there must be an amazing project to go through the history of these like Indian fast bowlers. And like how much excitement everyone in India has for them, and then how it disappears, because you go back to the start of Indian cricket and you had like Muhammad Nisar, right? Like clearly a really fast bowler. He doesn't play for all that long, and you have occasionally, these stories of these guys. Do you remember that kid who worked with Ian Ponce, who was a javelin thrower and said he could bowl at 100 miles per hour? And everyone believed that story because they wanted to believe. And that's the thing with Mayank Yadav. Indian fans want to believe that they have this genuinely tearaway bowler. And it's not that, this isn't an era where they're starved of fast bowling like they have been in other eras. Like obviously Bumrah is there, Siraj is a fantastic bowler. Shami is a great bowler as well. There's many other talents, but there's still a difference between those guys and what Mayank Yadav could do, because that's just red hot heat, right?
Yeah. I think there is a difference. I think maybe 15 years back, someone like a Mayank Yadav, there would have probably been more pessimism because Indian cricket had just got used to seeing so many of these come in and then drift away as quickly as they came in. But I think over the last few years, the way India has managed to get the best out of Bumrah, Mohammad Shami, Mohammad Siraj, so I think there's definitely a bit more hope now that we probably know how to manage these fast bowlers better than we've known in the past. And with people like Bharat Arun and Paras Mamre having worked at the NCA before coming in as bowling coaches, I think there's a bit more know-how now about how to manage these fast bowlers. And I think Troy Cooley is working at the NCA. So it'll be interesting to see how Mayank develops. But I definitely do think that there's more optimism now that we can get the best out of him if once he starts playing, I guess.
Beautiful. Thank you very much for coming on the podcast.
Thank you so much, Jarrod. Yeah.
Thanks to NV Play for their in-depth performance analysis in this project. Discover more about their incredible tools and solutions on their website.